thinking about it this morning, I realized that St. Paul's has been a hybrid church for at least 2 years now, or perhaps even more. How so? In different aspects of our lives. We have been doing the Wednesday Bible study in a hybrid fashion. Some of our small groups, at least the ones that I led, were doing small group ministry in a hybrid fashion. Even sometimes our vestry meetings would be hybrid. And in addition to that, we had adult formation as well as our children's formation videos available through the Right Now media for anyone to use at any time. And for the last almost 6 years, we have been doing our discipleship program in that hybrid fashion where Dane Olfen would reach out to us through the teleconferencing, video conferencing software. So we have been a hybrid church in so many different ways. And now we are a hybrid church that we can meet in person here with people here, as well as those of you watching and participating through the social media, different social media this morning. And that's something new for us. And there is a lot that we do need to learn about hybrid church. So as I invite you to join us today at 10:15, first to hear about the capital campaign, and then to have this really exciting conversation about hybrid church, I would like to introduce to you a person that I came across and I have learned a lot in a very short period of time, and that is Stephanie. And Stephanie is the CEO of an app that seeks to do just that, to bring a hybrid church together. And we will learn a lot more, but I just want to hear a little from Stephanie. So welcome, Stephanie, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. And we will get to hear a lot from you today, but just tell us a little about yourself and what you'll be sharing with us at 10:30.
Yeah, well, thank you, Amjad. I am honored to be with you guys today. I'm joining remotely from Massachusetts, just to the north of you all in Connecticut. But like Amjad said, I live and breathe in the world of hybrid ministry these days. I am an entrepreneur myself. I've taught entrepreneurship for a long time, and I'm the daughter of theologians, so it felt like two perfect things coming together during this new season of disruption for the church that I really began digging into, along with the team of people, this trend that we see called hybrid ministry. And it's amazing to meet churches like you all who have already been doing this for a while, but we've seen some really, really interesting statistics across the board for churches all over the world, especially in the US and Europe, of what the future of church looks like. So today, after this service, if you're sticking around to join us, we're going to be digging into that. What does the future of church look like? What is the state of the church right now? We're going to dive into some statistics in that, and then also look at what we've seen happen because of this disruption period, and really ask ourselves together, how could we imagine the church post-COVID? I used to work in higher education, and higher education is also always fundraising, so I know the world. And but it is so exciting when you get to come around shared vision together as a church. So Amjad introduced me a little bit earlier, but I'm excited to be joining all of you. I can't see all of your videos, but you can see mine. So I am going to you see the reactions as you guys go through. If you have places where you want us to stop or things like that. Today we're talking about the future of the church post-COVID. I'm going to start with just a 15 minutes, just going to give you some data dump at the beginning here. And then I believe we're going to break out into groups and go into discussion together, and then join back to share some thoughts and reflections. So I'll start first by introducing myself. like I said, my name is Stephanie. I currently live in Wenham, Massachusetts. If any of you know Gordon College, it's a Christian liberal arts college just north of Boston. I live right across the street from that college. So if you know the Gloucester, Beverly, Wenham area. I am not originally from this area. I have the privilege of having grown up in Pakistan and Afghanistan. I actually was born in Pakistan, just like Amjad. So my parents thought it was, moved there in the 90s to do humanitarian aid work. Thought it was a great idea to raise a family there. So that's where my siblings and I grew up until I was 18. I returned to the U.S. for college. I went to Gordon College. My family moved back. My parents both are seminarians. They go to Gordon Conwell Seminary. Both have degrees from there and work in there in various capacities. So my college education, my background since graduating has been in entrepreneurship. I worked at the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership at our college for the last 4 years, teaching and helping about 120 different student ventures of various kinds, both undergrad and graduate, business and nonprofit. So I really got steeped in the world of faith and entrepreneurship and the meeting of the two and what our impact on both the world and culture is through the means of business and nonprofit creation. So I'm going to fast forward my life story to the month of April, March and April, when COVID started hitting. I had the privilege of, through my time working at the Center for Entrepreneurial Leadership, getting to meet lots of different entrepreneurs across the world, and especially in the New England area. And some friends through that program came to me and said, Stephanie, something really interesting is happening to churches. We're noticing, all these churches are going online, and this is something new that we've never seen before. What's it like for people? So as every good entrepreneur does, the first thing you do is you go and you ask why, and you talk to people themselves. So what we did is started to interview pastors, lay people, asking them what their experience was taking church online. In the process, we started to hear lots of different feedback. The main one was that live stream is out there, it's an option, but church is a two-way relationship and live stream is a one-way broadcast. It's really hard to have, an engaging, take everything that you used to experience in a church community together and just put it on a one-way live stream. And so my team and I brought, knowing the, daughter of theologians and with an entrepreneurial background meets software developers, you can't help but make something together. And so we got together starting in May to write our first lines of code. And what was born out of it was a company called Alter Live. Alter Live is a two-way live stream and video conference technology platform we've specifically designed for small to medium-sized churches. So very much like what you guys are, I'm amazed, and Amjad and I met, and when he first showed me everything you guys do, I've been amazed because so many churches have not gone quite to the step you guys have to really think intentionally about not just replicating what happens on the stage in the morning, but what does it actually mean to bring church life together virtually. Alter has been live for about a month and a half now, and we've learned a lot along the way. So today, I'm going to share some high-level thoughts about some of these things we've learned, some of the trends we're seeing in the church, and then together, really the question for us today is, how can we imagine the church post-COVID? What is changing? Where have we come from? What is changing? I know you guys are in a 3-week series, and you're going to dig deeper into where you've come from and where you're going. And today I'm here to kind of give you the state of the union, so to say. Where is the state of the church right now? So 2020 was a big year for the church, but if we look back at what the church actually looked like post-COVID, here's some high-level statistics for you. So right now, 65% of the US population self-identify as Christian. 60% of local churches in the US are under 100 people. Mega churches are getting bigger, small and local churches are getting smaller or closing. This is a trend we've seen across both the US and Europe. So, but churches that are growing are reporting that 70% of their new members were already Christians before attending. So it leaves us with, if you another way to interpret that statistic is essentially one church's growth is because of another church's death. If we look a lot across the landscape to answer the question, are there more Christians? Are there more churches? The answer that comes back is yes and no. It's a combination of both. But ultimately, it's, I've heard the analogy before, it's like a aquarium where there's lots of fish in it. And instead of adding new fish into the aquarium, we're just moving fish from one aquarium into another aquarium back and forth. So people are moving from one church to another church and back to another church. But there's no new people being added, not as many new people being added into those church communities. So with that in mind, why is the question we all ask ourselves. There's lots of reasons we could extrapolate into, but one of the most interesting statistics I heard actually prior to COVID even hitting in December 2019, Barna came up with these statistics and said, Americans are getting tired of the usual church experience. 2 out of 3 adults, 64% of them, are saying, they're completely open to carrying out and pursuing faith in an environment or structure that differs from the typical church. 3 out of 4 adults say God is motivating people to stay connected to him, but in different ways and through different types of experiences than in the past. Some of you might be resonating with some of this now from what you've seen in your own communities or even in your own spiritual walk. But it's a fascinating, and when I first saw the statistic, it resonated with me and the people in my life that I've seen, especially within my age category, the 20-somethings that are growing in their desire for spirituality, but they're not growing in their desire for institutionalized religion, or they're finding it in other places. So, this is just, some of the data that we could see for the church post 2020. What does it look like now? So COVID has been a major disruptor across all areas of life. I don't have to remind any of you of that. You live it every day. For the church specifically, there's been some really interesting trends. I like to say now I have to remember the date, 1998. When the World Wide Web went live, churches were not the first in line to start building websites. Lots of other industries were. It's taken about 20 years and then some for churches to all finally get a website. What happened in March is the first time the church unilaterally across the board has been what we call a technology adopter, without reserve, because everyone had to suddenly figure out a way to go online. It's a really fascinating, from the sociological perspective, there will be, numerous textbooks written on what we've seen happen. But Barna was really putting a thermometer in the water while this happened to get a pulse. So these are some of the things we are seeing. Barna's saying 1 in 5 churches could close in the next 18 months. Now, that's a little bit of a clickbait title. Whether or not those churches are closing because of COVID, or that COVID is an added factor on top of underlying causes for a lot of churches that were already on the decline, that's not, separated out. But that's, what we could be looking at in the next 18 months. 12% of churches won't reopen until next year. The other statistic behind this is only 50% of churches are actually open right now to what they would call semi-normal activities. They're functioning a lot like what they did before COVID. That still leaves a lot of churches that are still in this, in-between stage. And lastly, 35% attendance. Right now, churches are seeing only about 35% of their people attending in person when they do open. So those 50 those 50% of churches that are resuming normal activities in their building again are really seeing a drastic decrease in attendance. And we can say that, for a lot of reasons, people are, coronavirus does not have a vaccine yet, and there's still health concerns out there. But at a high level, this data could, very much change as we keep seeing the trends. But at a high level, this is what we're looking at. A third of people will come back to church. A third will stay at home, but will fluctuate in person and online. And a third won't come back at all. So this, of these statistics, the last third is what I think most people find the most, alarming. A third of our congregation not coming back. Now, you could say for all sorts of reasons, and we have yet to actually see this play out. These are all projections at this point. But that third that won't come back, they could be the people that didn't, attend as regularly. They came early or came late, left early. Their habits have been reshaped drastically across the board, just like every other parts of our lives. But it's an important statistic because it tells us that the church might not just be going back to normal as we would like it to. So, in light of those statistics, we have the opportunity to either panic or really look inward and say, what is the opportunity that's being presented here to churches? Data can be interpreted in an alarmist way, but it can also, if we dig just one level deeper, we might find some things that we hadn't seen before. So I want to tell you a story. So, the third that I said is not coming back to church anymore. Well, that third, has lots of different reasons. So here's one reason I'd like you to kind of imagine. So there's the church that we recently talked to in North Carolina, and they shared with us this story. They have two women in their church who are both older. They've been in a nursing home for the last few years. And even before COVID, they couldn't get to church every week. Once COVID hit, nursing home closed, and the women weren't able to attend at all. The church went online, just like everyone else, and the women also joined online. After a few weeks of these women tuning in, they would call in to the video feed. They were doing it over Zoom. One of the women said to the pastor, "I don't feel like a second-class citizen anymore just because I can't come to the building in person. I can now participate. I can actually, be a part of church just because I can't be there in person." So, COVID progressed. There was some worry in the nursing home for outbreaks, and so they had the women, stay in their own rooms. So these two women lived down the hall from each other. But every Sunday morning, they would both call in early before the service start to talk with one another. And they would catch up on their grandkids and things like this. And slowly, other members of the congregation would also log in just to listen to their conversation because it was sweet, and they never got to talk to these women outside of the service. So the pastor said to me, it was really amazing. When this woman said, I don't feel like a second-class citizen, he wondered, what, COVID, these women couldn't, this was an issue even before COVID. COVID has made it worse. But what were we doing for them before this season? What, did we make it only that you could only come in person? Was that the attitude that we had? So he said, just like Amjad, he said, I'm embracing hybrid ministry because I see it as a new way to do community, not just a Band-Aid solution to this disruption, but because I want people who are online watching my service or tuning in to feel more than just passive, like they're second class just because they can't be in the building, but they're full participants. They're full members with us in our community, no matter where they are. So I tell you this story because it's one that reminds me constantly of the work that we do and bringing community together, and also to encourage you. So, who are these people for whom online church has actually opened doors? So these women are one example, but I'd actually like to present to you a list today of all the other people I've seen in the last 4 months that have actually been able to experience a level playing field, so to say, because church has gone online. So the obvious ones, people who are shut-ins, those who are, who can't leave their house or for any reason, who are older or who, mentally, psychologically getting out of their home is not easy. Spouses whose other spouses don't go to church, but who watch church together on TV. There's a lot of, this is an example of a church in the UK that had this story for us, that they have some members of their congregation where the wife goes to church and the husband doesn't. And now during COVID, the fact that church can be on their computer at home or on their TV, the husband is actually starting to tune in because there's a convenience factor to it, as well as the fact that he doesn't have to, go talk to strangers that he doesn't know, but he can start to slowly, get to know what's happening behind those doors. Parents of rambunctious or on the spectrum children who are tired of getting judgmental stares from people in the pews. We think, it's kind of funny to think about this, but we think about I am not a parent myself, but and I see a lot of reactions to that. I listened into a panel discussion of families who are who have children on the spectrum or with various disabilities, and their number one reaction was, my children can now participate and not have to feel like I can mute them if suddenly something is happening on my end, and I don't have to feel embarrassed, but they can still feel like a part of the service. They can read scripture, they can sing songs, they can use the chat, they can be participants, and I don't have to worry about whether or not I'm going to be able to, handle the situation that we're in if I'm in the building. Out-of-towners for the weekend. This has been long before COVID. Churches have put their sermons into podcasts or YouTube or online. But even beyond that, I should say people who move away. There's been an increase in numbers of people that are joining their home church that they moved away from, or people that are inviting family, friends, or members like that. So you go to church and now you can invite your mom who lives in another state to join with you. The introverts, I am not an introvert, but I happen to be married to an introvert, and I can hear this a lot. Anywhere between 25 to 40% of the U.S. population is introverted. But going to church for an introvert is not maybe like going to church for an extrovert. And I often forget that the idea of entering into a building where there's a room full of people that you don't know to go and sit and listen to a message and participate in a service and then stay for coffee hour afterwards. I mean, that's exciting to me, and a lot of people that's not exciting to. But introverts, they can participate in their own ways and find their voice now online because they can control their environment a little differently. Obvious one as well, those who are immune compromised, those who can't, be in person during flu season or, especially during COVID, but also other times of the year. That's an important population that we often forget about. And lastly, people in places where Christian gathering is risky or not permitted. We're seeing a huge increase in online gatherings in China, Singapore, or actually not Singapore. I'm forgetting. I just talked to somebody the other day who mentioned this. But China, some other places, you can see the use case study. Imagine that you can't actually gather in person, but suddenly online becomes a safe space where you can experience community and fellowship together. So this is just some of the list. You could go deeper and deeper into all of these pockets, and remember this third of people that, is not going to come back to church anymore is one population, but there's also people who are coming to church for the first time. Or who haven't come in a while, but all of a sudden they have the ability to because the playing field has been leveled. Some of these for the introverts, digging back into this again, we were just on a conference this last Thursday with 6,000 people, and they had a question in the chat that said, has online church benefited you? And this is just a screenshot of some of the people who basically self-proclaimed introverts who said, I can engage now on my own terms. We've seen stories of people who were, active in their church, but quiet. Leadership didn't really know much about them or their skill set. But online, they start interacting, they start engaging with people in a whole new way. And these people start to rise to the surface. One of my coworkers, Andy, who's here today as well, you can ask him about this story in his own church, but one of their most recent elders who just got elected in or voted in was somebody who nobody knew prior to COVID, but because she was so active in the chat channels and in greeting people and welcoming people, suddenly the leadership started taking notice of her, and through conversation realized she has some amazing gifts that just have not been realized because she hasn't been able to shine in an extroverted dominated world. The next generation, the younger generation. So here's a hopeful statistic for you. In the UK right now, more than half of young people aged 18 to 24 are engaging in online worship. That's an incredible statistic for the UK, which is very much a post-Christian society and for whom church decline has been a big issue. The fact that young people are actually tuning in to watch and to engage in online worship is huge. And it's very much we're meeting them where they're at. Digital natives who have who live and breathe on the digital spaces. Church can suddenly meet them there as well. And last but not least, people. The statistic on people who have been attending your church, but just not in ways that you might think of. So remember the statistic I shared with you earlier that people are tired of their usual church experience. Well, this is in national studies in the U.S., 40% of Americans say they participate in church weekly. But really, on a Sunday morning, we're only seeing about 20% of Americans with butts in the seats, so to say, which means there's a 20% gap here. So you could interpret that two ways. One could be that those people they want to look good on a survey, and so they say they go to church. The other option is that people actually are experiencing church community in some way, but it just might not be in your pew. And so, there's some data coming out that's saying there's, this missing 20% that we're not seeing in our pews is engaged in worship online. They're watching devotionals. They're reading scripture on their own. Maybe they're a part of a small group, but they just might not be coming into church on a Sunday morning. That's a hopeful statistic for us because it means that there's a lot happening outside of our buildings that we need to start paying attention to. So what does hybrid ministry look like? I am preaching to people who've been doing hybrid ministry for a long time. So you guys have an imagination for this already, which is admirable in so many ways. But in my work and as I work with churches week in and week out, we really are helping answer this question and discover it together with churches. But, it really looks like people watching a live service online and in person. It's a both and mindset, not an either or. Prior to COVID, it was you would go to church online and then it would be either live stream or recorded, then put up later, and you would do one or you would only watch the online if you missed it. But now this mentality is switching a bit, that there's an inclusion of people regardless of where they are, that they're equal participants, and that you could actually have thriving and authentic community even in an online space. Secondly, it means bringing your church events, conversations, and engagement into new spaces, both virtual and in person. So I live in the world of technology, and we're really thinking about the tech space and providing really great tools for churches to be able to do this well. But it also means for in-person spaces. What does it mean outside of your four walls to experience church together? And a lot of churches have been doing this, whether it's, through volunteerism or activity in their local communities, small groups in homes, going to the nursing home, you name it. Your church probably has a lot of these activities too. But it is a call for us to think even more intentionally about the role of our buildings versus the role of our community on outside of just a Sunday. And lastly, creating new ways to be the church outside of the building. So like I said, there's some amazing opportunities and stories I've seen of churches who have decided to pivot their content from being just, now that they're in an online space, yes, their services go online, but they're actually creating other things. like guides to how to do homeschooling well 101. Some members from their community get together and post their top tips. And it really is becoming more about community resource and, encouraging one another and providing that mutual support. I think you are in a later workshop in this series going to talk about how the church has changed from being a place of social gathering to suddenly being really empty on the weekdays. What would it be like to change that? That's a passion project for me in another life, maybe in a different startup after this. But there's some really fascinating statistics about what churches have the opportunity to do with their incredible real estate. So it does. It looks like a both and. This is a church that we work with in Boxford. They use altar every Sunday. It's very similar to what you guys are using on your Sunday morning. But they're able to bring people from home. Half their worship team leads worship from home live every Sunday. They have people give prayer requests in the building to an open mic, but also people give prayer requests over at home and they can be heard into the sanctuary. They have the ability to actually, bring together, like you guys have been doing, their small groups that are high. Some people are able to meet in person, but some aren't yet. And so they're able to merge those together. It looks different, but I would like to leave you with this before we break into conversation. Our communities need to go beyond the physical to embrace the real, those who are really hurting, really isolated, and really in need. And it might mean that church will start looking different for all of us. It's an opportunity like none other that the church has had to go through in recent history, in which we're able to embrace disruption and actually turn it into an opportunity to reimagine what the church looks like. So I'm going to leave with these questions up on the screen here, and I'll let Amjad actually do the tell us what we need to do next. But here's some questions we can ask ourselves today. Have you all seen some of these trends in your own community or heard of them in communities, other friends or family members who are part of other faith communities? What makes church church? What does it mean to gather together? And what would it look like to put resources into other expressions of church? What does that look like? Both, time, energy, but also spaces. Where do we see, solving from the back in, we say this in entrepreneurship a lot. You start with what does someone actually need versus what do I think they need? So what do people need in the world around us right now? And how can the church go out to meet them there? So Amjad, I'll let you tell us what we need to do to get into these breakout groups.
All right. Thank you so much, Stephanie. This is wonderful stuff, and I think it should generate some wonderful conversations around your tables. So a few practical things. If you are the only person sitting at your table, please find another place to sit, join another table, join someone else, and engage with these questions. Right now, you can't see any tables, but once I take a break from this session, all your tables will reappear and you'll be able to enter that space and have these conversations. I have put these questions in the chat area, so you'll be able to click on the chat button on the right-hand ribbon and you'll find these questions. And so I encourage you to be on your tables and discuss these, and then we are going to have kind of a plenary and bring people and hear from what you all talked about. All right, so I believe we have about 15 minutes, let's say, for this exercise. So in a moment, your tables will appear. All right. All right, thank you all for the conversations that you were having. We believe they were fulfilling and exciting, and things that needed to be said were said, and thoughts that needed to be provoked were provoked. And now is the time to share what you talked about, just very briefly, with everyone on this in this venue. So the way we are going to do it is, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. and we are going to restrict the time. So I'll be the keeper of that. So if you raise your hand, I can bring you over. If you have something encouraging and exciting to share, I would love for everyone to hear. So anything exciting and encouraging that you talked about, things that you had not thought of before, or thoughts that Stephanie's wonderful presentation made you think about. If you have that, this is the time to share with others. So please do raise your hand. And the way you raise your hand is in the right-hand side, the ribbon, there is a button for that that says raised hand. So you can just raise your hand there, and we can bring you over. And we are not going to do this exercise for a very long time. It's going to be a brief exercise. So if you're thinking about it, please do raise your hand.
Hey, Dane.
Hi,
Dane.
Stephanie. Hi, I'm Judd. How are you? Good to see you.
Good. Good.
So we just had a good time talking about the challenges of kind of being virtual, but really we camped much more on the positives, that it's good to be a part of it. The ability just to kind of come, like I'm in my t-shirt this morning, and a number of the folks were just kind of like, hey, I could relax, and I have more undistracted time of worship and concentration. So the last thing I did, and this is something I learned that I think is so important when you are virtual, is that we did a little game. We said, hey, what's on your desk? And this is the Navigator Wheel. It's always on my desk. It's a coaster. But having ways to pull people into each of our worlds, even though we're virtual, is because it's very hard to connect. It really, it is different. We all miss either the hug, depending on whether you're touchy or not, the hug, bump, the, kind of the, hey, how you doing? But there are ways of doing some of that to help us. So.
Yeah, it's a great point, Dane. I mean,
Awesome.
it is.
Thank you so much, Dane.
But it is interesting that engagement piece is not something you can just, it's not like you just, same way you can't just, assume that something happens, that just because you're going to talk in front of a church, in a church building, that everybody's going to immediately get what you're saying. Same online. There's, you have to find new ways to draw people in, to make them feel known and heard.
Great. Okay. Hey, we really focused on the second question. What makes church church? And it was summarized really nicely by our youngest member. It's an intent to worship, and whether that's online or in person. So as Dane mentioned, the idea of having something in hand that says I'm connected, but spiritually, mentally, being willing to make that effort and engage in worship and the praise of God. And we've seen that manifest with the virtual choir, and people doing that each week, and then the being able to worship on vacation, and basically it was said to meet people where they are, with the appreciation that it's both and, not either or. It's not just virtual worship; it's virtual worship and personal contact, because it is important that people are able to connect and interact.
That's awesome.
There's plenty of other people in our group that can talk about what I missed.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Scott. I'm going to bring Pat over now.
Oh, did we lose her?
Okay, I'm going to check if we have. All right, so I'm going to bring Dennis over also, and then Pat, I'm going to work on getting you here as well.
I'm sorry we don't have a video going, but
That's
Archie talked a lot about the last question, especially in relationship to nursing homes and the elderly, and how much that they benefit from seeing, let's say, the Mass on TV if they've grown up with that. Music sometimes is a very key reminder and experience for them, hymns, etc. And somehow that's a need that nursing homes, really need to address, both with their church or the church in their community and with the staff, let's say, from the nursing home, whether it's providing more opportunities on a video, link, whether it's cell phones and computers that are more available to some people. And even if they're mentally challenged, they have at the beginnings of dementia, these other experiences really touch them in ways that, we underestimate sometimes. Nancy, one of our new group members, talked about her own mother having dementia, being in a nursing home, and what music and seeing the Mass on TV meant to her. While she was there, you could see the physical changes in her, and so this is an area we think, the virtual services, whether it's music and service, should pay attention to, especially for people like Pat in our group who serviced from our church the nursing home in our community, and now is not able to do that, but cares very deeply about how the people there are experiencing, the church.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Actually, you set us up for that. Pat is next. Thank you.
Just that I miss going to the nursing homes. I really do. And I think, we're talking about computers in the nursing homes. I don't think there's too many. I don't think the people know how to use them. But they know how to use a TV. If there was some way, we could get on the TV and give them, access to our virtual church service, I think it would be great. And I miss seeing them. I would love to go back and I would love to put my arms around them, but I know I can't. But that's a community there.
Thank you so much, Pat. And what you just said is so valuable, because church is about that, and that is what I love about what Stephanie first, in our very first conversation with me, talked about, which was the church is not a single-way stream, it's a two-way stream. And it's a two-way stream of love and care. And that's what we want to do. The beautiful thing is, Pat, that we are on TV, actually. So on Monday nights at 6 o'clock on Channel 10, our service is rebroadcast. So they can actually watch us there also. And but that's exactly what came, and this was God leading. We didn't even know that this was a possibility. And the local Comcast, they reached out to us and they said, we have seen what you're doing on social media and we really love it and we want to broadcast it. So we gave them the rights to do that. And so again, it was God. We were not looking for this opportunity, and we found that a lot of people do benefit from just watching it on the television and not having to worry about technology. So absolutely, we have to look for every avenue to actually do that. So thank you, Pat. And there is a lot that even technology hasn't still figured out. And the thing that I again love about what Stephanie and her company is doing is actually engaging with churches like she just did today, and really sharing with us what she is doing, but also learning from us as to what the needs are, and then going back to her technical people and saying, okay, here's a need, how do we how do we find a solution for it? And that is what I really loved in my interactions with Stephanie. And I really, really hope and pray that with her efforts and the efforts of so many people who are trying to figure out how to reach not only the unreached, but also those who the traditional way of being church is not able to reach, which was the beautiful list that Stephanie gave us today. And two things that I would say: there is one person, a pastor of a Presbyterian church, that I had the privilege of being in a webinar with when COVID first started. And he is actually originally from the Philippines and is a pastor of a Presbyterian church in California. And I really loved the way he thought. And one of the things he says is that we make an assumption that everyone who comes to church actually enjoys their experience in church. That's an assumption that we make, and it may not always be the correct assumption. There may be a lot of people who are better served if there are other ways of connecting than just the traditional, and introvert is one way. And then another person from Stephanie's team, in a conversation that we were having, in which Stephanie had put together this panel of really wonderful people, one of her team members asked this question, that how did churches take care of the old lady who was attending church and now was in a shut-in situation and could not be part of the church? How did the church take care of it before COVID? And there was a silence in the room, because I think we all knew the answer, which is that other than maybe taking altar flowers to them and communion to them and, doing it also once a month or something like that, if that, there really isn't a way to keep people connected and engaged and alive in the life of the church. And the beautiful thing about this envisioning of this thing called hybrid church, and I understand all the concepts that it conjures, but putting all of that aside, the beautiful thing about this is that it actually gives people the possibility to engage and stay alive in the life of the church, much beyond a person's physical ability or sometimes even personal preference to be in the church. And I'll close the session with sharing with you just a few things. One of the most beautiful things that I have experienced in these last few months is, and you all know her, Laurie Marcho, and she's right now online, sharing how she is able to worship with her family who is in a different state because of what we are doing. Alison Kramazik, for her to be able to be with her nieces and that family who lives in New Jersey and actually not only worship together, but to produce music together in the virtual choir is really something, because that niece is her godchild, and she really didn't know how she could be a godparent to her niece before having this hybrid church. It's bringing people together. It's bringing people together, people who want to be together. It's bringing people together. And that is what God is all about. God is all about reconciling the world, bringing people together. And this is yet another avenue God has given us. So I want to thank our keynote speaker today for not only speaking to us today, but also being in the ministry of bringing people together in the love of God. So thank you so much. Absolutely. Please do raise your, this is absolutely.
Raise your reaction.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and I look forward to you really working with us, and in whichever way that we can be part of your process, we would love to do that. And then I want to thank each and every one of you who's present here, because you are here because I feel church matters to you, and being church matters to you. And I want to thank you for that, for carrying that in your hearts. So thank you all. We have gone overboard with our time, but it was wonderful, and really enjoy this weekend. And Stephanie, I'm actually coming very close to your driving in 15 minutes.
I know. You said that.
All right. Thank you all, and take care. And
Thank
God
you all so much.